Let's get spooky. This is our Station Boo, where we explore the dark and mysterious corners of the world of horror, and we know that you are dying to listen.
And welcome to the Spooky and Kooky podcast of Earth Station Boo, where we talk all things horror. Today it is Karen and I who are going to be having two lovely guests. Unfortunately, Lisa was not able to join us, but we have Clay Gilbert and we have Bill Mulligan joining us today. Yay!
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. But
thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. We really do always love having fun guests on with us. All righty. So we have two amazing guests. This is their first time on. So we want to give each of them just a little bit of a chance to kind of give like a little elevator pitch about who they are. Bill, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Bill Mulligan. I'm a high school science teacher in Sanford, North Carolina. When I'm not doing my regular job, I do indie filmmaking and a lot of podcasting. It's been fun. And I do special effects. Whatever you want me in a film, if I can get there, I'll be glad to. I'll hold the microphone. And a couple of years ago, I published my first book, Round, from Falstaff Books.
Nice.
And that's a cool experience. And
all right, Clay, how about you? You tell a little bit about yourself.
All right, Clay Gilbert. Since 2013, I've published 14 novels in genres ranging from urban fantasy to science fiction, horror, and dystopian YA also. My 15th novel, Pearl of the Shadows, should be out in October, and my 16th novel, Into the Imago, which is a sequel to my 13th novel, Binary Sunset, that should be out in November. In addition to being a full-time professional author since 2013, I've also, I also spent about 20 years teaching college English courses at a variety of places, including University of South Carolina, Maryville College, and Strayer University. Sorry, that should have been South College and Strayer University, not Maryville. At any rate, so these days I'm doing the full-time writing thing, and also I worked as a volunteer staff member for DragonCon from 2008 to 2018. I've been attending DragonCon since 1989. It's one of my favorite places on earth.
So yeah, both of these guys we have met through DragonCon. Bill was actually originally going to be one of the original hosts for this podcast, but life got in the way, like a fun new grandbaby.
That's the good. Yeah, there's been good, there's been bad, and I'm just going to focus on the good. But
we're glad to have him here as a guest, and we definitely plan on having him be a frequent flyer. And then Clay was actually recommended to us by Derek, who we had on with Carol earlier in this season. And I had said, hey, we're going to be doing an episode on Friday the 13th. You want to be on it? He goes, not a big fan, but guess who is? My buddy Clay. You got to talk to Clay. And I was
Eric's
like, all right.
Great guy.
I'm like, all right, done. We've got this. We'll get him in on here. So we're extremely happy to have both of you guys here. So thank you so very much. But we are talking about Friday the 13th, the original, not any of the remakes, not any of the sequels.
The OG.
The OG. The one that started it all.
The one that should have been left alone because it was perfect.
Yes, it was. It was perfect. But we're going to get everybody's initial thoughts real quick. So, Clay, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay, well, least favorite film of the series. And that's basically because I'm a Jason guy. All of the elements that were the series is familiar to people from i.e., Jason, the hockey mask, and all that. That all slides into place with part three, but you at least get Jason in part two, and I think part two is the most unsettling of the whole series. Now, I got to give respect to the first one because none of the others would have been made without it. It's definitely iconic. I'm not going to say it's not, but for me, it stands apart from the rest of the series because it doesn't really have quite all the iconic elements of the later films in place just yet. Kind of in the same way that later on in the series, Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, also messes with the formula because the killer in that film might dress like Jason, but it's not Jason. Anyway, I like the movie. I like the original film. I just don't like it as much as the later ones, especially part two. I would say overall my favorite is part six. It's the most fun, but the scariest to me is part two.
Okay. Phil, what are your initial thoughts?
Well, and I'm so old, I saw this in the theater opening night. This movie came out in 1980. I was 19 years old. That was probably my prime movie going time. I would see almost anything, whether it had good reviews or bad reviews. I lived in the movie theaters. So I was there opening night, and I was primed for it because I read Fangoria, and I was told this had some great special effects. I knew who Tom Savini was, and I was a big fan. And it was a fun night. Is it a great film? No, it's not great, but it was good. It did what it had to do. I went to summer camp. We sat around the campfire at night and told scary stories about killers who ran around killing people, much like us. And then we had to go to sleep in a cabin. Those were good times. That's what this was like. And as a special effects person, as a person who dabbled in it, I never got nearly as good as Savini. Wouldn't even put myself anywhere near that category. But I love practical effects. I love trying to come up with a magician's way to show something that shouldn't be. And having some experience in that, I'll tell you, when the first victim that we see killed with the throat slitting, I just about fell out of my chair because I know how things were done back in the old days. You saw a knife go up, and then you saw the person's face, and then you saw the knife go down, and then we cut to the next day, and there's a body covered in a sheet. And we didn't see any of that. We saw a girl go against a tree. A knife comes up. There's no editing. The only thing that got cut was her throat. And it was unbelievable. Just absolutely terrific. And the audience responded to it so much. So it was fun. It was well done. This is one of my least favorite horror genres. I'm not a slasher fan. The only thing I hate more than slasher movies is like torture porn. But I respect those that did a good job, either came first or told a good story, had some characters, had some effects. And this is very good. It's not Halloween. I like this film. For all its flaws, I like it.
All right. Karen?
For me, this is like a perfect film because everything is condensed in one location. I never went to summer camp because my parents were like, "Yeah, no, you're not going. You're too young for that." Even when I grew older, they were like, "Nah, you're better off with your grandparents." So, but for me, I didn't really, after part one, I was like, man, this is a good film. Then I started watching the sequels, all that, and I was like, why do we have to add like the whole mystical elements that, Jason is more than he is? For me, like, the scariest thing is a person, is a human, not something that, irreverent, that a undead thing that a super boogeyman that comes and just kills campers. For me, that his mom, was the boogeyman because humans are scary, and that's why I love part one as much as I do.
I think that probably keys into why I don't like it as much. I like supernatural horror more than any other form of horror. When I write horror, it's supernatural. The films most are supernatural in nature, although I do like some stuff that isn't supernatural. I do like the slasher films, but I tend to favor the ones like the later Jason films and the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, which do have supernatural elements to them. I don't know why that is, couldn't tell you. but it's just me. It's just the way I'm wired. I like the supernatural stuff. And I was going to say, when Bill was talking about having seen the original in the theater, um, Bill and I have a lot in common. I don't think about anybody's age until we start talking about like statistics, like having seen this film in the theater. The first of the Friday the 13th movies I saw in the theater was part 3. Uh, it came out when I was 11 years old, which is still pretty young to go watch that in the theater. But my mother was incredibly indulgent.
That's a good mom right there.
She suffered through a lot of things in the name of being nice to her son. And I actually, from part 3 forward, I saw every Friday the 13th movie in the theater. So I don't know. I think to a large extent, a movie like this is so suited to the dark theater that having seen the first one in the theater might, even given its own merits, which it has a lot, it might elevate it if you had, like Bill did, if you had seen it in the theater, whereas I just saw it on HBO. Whereas for me, part 3 was, especially in 3D, that movie just doesn't play as well flat. Anyway,
it's true.
And we believe here on Earth Station Boo that horror is all based on perspective.
Sure.
It's a personalized experience. So what one person likes is their thing, and what somebody else likes is their thing, and not everybody's going to have the same, and we're perfectly okay with that.
Yeah,
so
I think part of the thing, if you're going to make a franchise out of this sort of character,
reality can be,
it's almost inevitable if they go supernatural, because it would be unrealistic to have this many Friday the 13th movies. Well, we certainly couldn't keep following Mom because she was gone after
and they're
the
not
first
being
one.
an adult there to keep the teenagers in mind.
It's almost like they recreated the franchise
went on a
with 2 onward, and then had to get more and more, out there. Freddy was already out there. Freddy was out there from the get-go. And Michael Myers was not and should never have become. That's a whole different thing there.
You could see this story today.
That one.
Yep.
In the news. Easy. Easy. But now we have it on the screen, and we have it sensationalized, and we can see all the creative ways that good old Mother Dearest, what was that, 20 years later, decides to wreak havoc on the camp counselors. And then
Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon. You know what, though? I wasn't mad. I thought that was actually a pretty good kill. But but it's one of those films that I think does stand the test of time, and I think it's one of those films that we will go back and we will look at over and over and over again, because it has so much for us to draw to. It has that reality aspect, but then again, that ending does give you that slightly twist of supernatural, that something's not right,
which is perfect. After having an entire film where everything is based in reality, to suddenly have that turn up. Now, obviously, I jumped out of my skin at the end of Carrie, and apparently so did the screenwriters, because they put this clearly inspired by Carrie ending there. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. ... The theater exploded. The theater exploded. People literally rose out of their chairs, which usually is just an expression, but they did. And we screamed, and then we laughed, which is the perfect ending for this film.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And we've all kind of touched on different aspects of this film, and it's because it's an iconic film. So what do we think makes it iconic? Like, what aspects to it, at least for us individually, make it an iconic film? Karen, do you want to start us off?
It's the twist. I mean, you don't see that coming until, like, the very, moment of this lady's coming. My name is Mrs. Voorhees. I used to work here a long time ago. And then, she starts going into that whole alter ego of her child. And then
kill him, mother, kill him.
And it's that it was the twist before M. Night Shyamalan even thought of a twist. So for me, that was the twist. That makes it so iconic.
Yeah. Actually, preparing for this podcast, I saw a few of like the behind the scenes interviews and stuff like that. And the woman who plays Mrs. Voorhees wanted to be in the film more. And they're like, no, we want this to be a complete, like, you weren't there, so they didn't know it was you. We want it to be a big surprise. And she's like, okay. But she actually thought the script was shit.
Yeah. Wow.
She's like, this is garbage, but guess what? It's paying me enough to buy a new car, so I'll do it.
That's fine. Think it's garbage if you want to. Just hush up, do your part, and yeah.
Yeah.
And she did a good job.
That's what she did. Yeah,
she did. She was crazy. Okay, when you watch the movie, it's surprising now. It's played off as a bit of a mystery. Who's the killer? And they obviously want you to think it's the harbinger, the old guy at the beginning who's don't go and whatever. Okay, it's too obvious. And as I'm watching it, now part of the problem with being a writer is when you watch something, you've already ruined it because you've read Save the Cat. You know exactly plot structure for films and stuff. But when you're watching it, it's obvious that the killer is someone that people trust and like, and they smile when they see them. Then they get killed. So it's not some greasy old guy. It's someone that they trust. And so as soon as she showed up on the screen, I'm like, oh, boom, here we go. And it's still a good twist. But as far as what makes it so iconic, the twist is a good one. The music is iconic. Absolutely. And has been ripped off a million times, but they did it first. That goes a long way, more than people think. And the effects work. This is a very episodic film. We're just kind of going from one kill to the other. And when you're doing that, the kills had better be good or you're going to lose interest. Well, these were Tom Savini kills. He did a great job. So I think those two elements really, really sold it. And I was surprised. And Clay, you're not the first person to say this. I'm not a big fan of part 2. And part of the reason is they cut so much of the effects out. What you got to see was like a step back. It was more like a film from 10 years earlier, at least the version I saw. Maybe it's been put back in. Seeing stuff up close and personal really kept my interest. I was like, I didn't know what to expect. And that's unusual after watching so many films.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of part 2.
Yeah.
It's this film I don't care for, but it's just because no Jason. It's really just it's shot in much the same. To me, part 2 is shot in much the same style as part 1. It's just got a different structure because you don't have the mom there, and you don't have the element of realism because you have Jason doing the killing.
Right.
I don't know. Perhaps, as I said just a little while ago, if I had seen part 1 first, and I didn't see it first. I saw part 3 first, and then I went back and watched part 2, and then I went back and watched part 1. So that colored my experience of pretty much the whole series. If I'd seen the original in the theater like you did, I'm sure I would have had a different experience. I probably still would have liked the films with Jason more because my own taste in horror runs to the supernatural pretty exclusively. But I still probably would cut the first one more slack than I do. I hardly revisit it. From time to time, I will. A couple of years ago, I watched the whole series through all the way through, but I haven't done that too many times. I usually start with part 2 and go forward, or sometimes even part 3. But anyway, way off track.
That's okay. What do you find to be iconic in this film, even though it's not one of your favorites?
Well, it sets up the slasher genre as it became defined in the 80s and onward. There were precursors to the slasher genre. I mean, Psycho is a precursor. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a precursor. Halloween, obviously, is a precursor. But all of those films, I think one of the real additional precursors to being considered a slasher movie is a certain air of disrespectful of a disreputability. Slasher, to be a real slasher movie, I don't think you can really be a critic's darling. Technically, some people will grudgingly admit that Halloween, Carpenter's '78 classic, is a slasher film, but they like it so much they don't want to tarnish it with that title. Nobody's worried about tarnishing Friday the 13th.
Mm-hmm.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre is technically a slasher movie, but it's considered an art film too, rightfully so. And so people don't want to throw it on the slasher heap, so to speak. So I think Friday the 13th is the first movie to take those elements that some of those more quote unquote highbrow movies possessed and actually put them together in the package that horror fans in the 80s and onward became familiar with as the slasher movie.
So it proudly said, "I am a slasher and I'm proud of it."
Right.
Pretty much,
right.
yeah.
It wasn't ashamed of what it was.
Yeah. I think this film had a lot of things that made it iconic, like the effects. Tom Savini is a legend. The things that he does in horror is just it's beautiful, to be honest. Like it's fascinating to watch. And I will say this, I think each of the kills in this film were done well. Even the ones that seemed a little half-assed, they're still done in a way that actually like still invokes emotion for you, where you still go, ooh, ooh, oh no, like you still have a reaction to it.
Yeah,
Um,
the only reaction I didn't have was the beheading because it takes a while. Even with with the
yeah,
machete, I'm like, you need a couple more
yeah,
cuts there.
yeah, but it's an 80s slasher film. I'm not looking for full realistic everything in there. Especially especially with this film being that they had to force the money for it. It was not they had to put in an ad to be like, "Hey, this movie's coming out. Everybody should check it out," just to get investors invested into it because otherwise they would not have been able to make it. And what's even more interesting is that these guys hadn't made a horror film before. They had just made two kids movies before this. And the guy who wrote it has never written anything horror. So he literally watched Halloween because it was like the previous big blockbuster film. And then I think he watched a couple of other like horror films that had done well to figure out how to write a horror movie. So when people talk about, oh, you can definitely tell like Halloween inspired this scene or that scene or this perspective, it literally is because he watched it and he went, oh, that'd be great, and then
Mm-hmm.
wrote down. But this is actually a great segue to the next thing I kind of wanted to talk about, is the influence of Craven and Carpenter on Cunningham. So who wants to start on this one?
I'll say, I mean, I think probably of the two, Wes Craven the most because Cunningham worked with him on Last House on the Left. Although what I've read is that he deliberately tried to make Friday the 13th not Last House on the Left. And that's certainly true because although Last House is an important film, it's an unpleasant one. And it's hard to get through. It's very well made. It's actually beautifully filmed, but it's not a fun movie. If anyone ever tells you, boy, that was a fun movie, run. And of course, Halloween had to be an influence. I mean, I think this movie got made because Halloween got made. But I don't see a lot of Carpenter-esque quality. Cunningham's not a director. I'm not saying he's a bad director, but he's not a director who necessarily leaves a mark that you say, oh, this is a Cunningham film.
Yeah.
And that can be good. That if you look at he's done a wide variety of films, kids films, action exploitation films and everything. He can do, maybe he has more range, but that kind of takes away from horror films. Horror film lovers love to have that. Oh, that's a Carpenter film. There's the Carpenter touch. There's the this and that. I don't really see that with Cunningham.
I think Steve Miner, who directed part two and at least one of the later films, I think he has a much more distinctive style than Cunningham does, ironically. But Cunningham's style suits part one. I'm not sure part one would have been what it is had Steve Miner directed it, or had, say, Tom McLaughlin, who directed part six. It had a also very unique visual style, but it was totally different from Steve Miner. So if one of those guys had directed part one, it would have been a completely different. And who knows if the latter parts of the series would have even got made. Anyway.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Friday the 13th does have that Halloween type feel to it because it is that slow build. Unlike Halloween, you don't see murder. You don't see the dude like in the mask that's stepping out, watching you, stepping back, watching you. But it does have that slow build up to the confrontation. So yeah, I do see a lot of that, in Cunningham's work. I'm really not familiar with Cunningham. This is like the only movie I've seen by him. Sorry.
Oh, hey, it happens. I mean, there's also like movies that I've seen that I didn't realize were done by a certain director until later when I'm like, oh, that's who did it. Okay, cool. Cool, cool, cool. Did not know that, but good to know. So yeah, he's actually been a producer on quite a few of the Jason movies. I think Jason is the movie that put him where he is a known figure. And even then, like he's still not as known as Carpenter or Wes or a number of other horror directors. So the movie itself, we'll talk about the special effects, the acting, the plot. Let's kind of dig into all of that. What are some of our thoughts on there?
Yeah, I think the first Friday the 13th film definitely stands out effects wise because of Tom Savini. The whole thing to me is the realism that Savini brought to his effects, and that he brought to his effects in every film he worked on. I've never seen a film with Savini effects where there wasn't a component of realism.
Yeah.
So certainly that. Sure, that I think the acting in the film is particularly great. There are individual bits of greatness here and there, but it's believable for what it is. I mean, you believe it sets up a good sense of verisimilitude in that, you believe the moment of what you're experiencing, even if technically the acting is probably not the best. The whole package works, even if the individual components might not be the artistic pinnacle of cinema. The whole picture hangs together very well.
Yeah. Bill, how about you?
I would say this is almost the definition of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. The plot is serviceable. The acting, I mean, they weren't given a lot to do, but I thought they did okay for what they had. They were believable as teenagers, which doesn't sound particularly great, but I see a lot of movies where they're not. The effects, of course, are exemplary. They're terrific. Cinematography is good. Editing is good. It's all okay, but when you add it all together, you end up with a film that has really stood the test of time and inspired all these sequels. This movie was roasted by the critics. I think one of the things that got me out there was listening to Siskel and Ebert's review, which may have been the worst review they ever gave anything. Gene Siskel was giving out the addresses of Betsy Palmer and which Paramount for people to write letters and harass them for making this thing. He called Sean Cunningham like the most loathsome creature ever to work in cinema, something along those lines. Like, but that's a bold statement. We got Harvey Weinstein and Klaus Kinski. Come on, this movie was so toasted. And then you go to see it, and I thought, I had a great time. And I wasn't alone because a movie doesn't make this many sequels and get this much reaction if it's that bad. There's a lot of bad slashers, and you don't even remember their names.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Karen, how about you?
I mean, as a whole, I enjoyed the movie. I mean, break it down into parts. They could have been, some elements done better. I do love the special effects, except for when it came to like the head chopping. I
That's
mean,
fair.
you need a little bit more than one swing here. The acting, I mean, there were some, some gems in there. There were some gems, and poor old man who got killed in the second one. I actually liked him.
Yeah.
Then he got killed in the second one. I'm like, really? Of course, some of the kills kind of got me because I'm like, she had to have an accomplice because, hanging a person on a door, that's dead weight. And
Yeah.
I can't even do that. And I have to lift my dad like every once in a while. He's 140 pounds and he can't stand up by himself. He has to have, somebody lift him up, and that's dead weight.
Yeah.
So I'm like, she probably had an accomplice. Because it was my little
Or
plot hole.
or she's just that like deranged, rage-filled mother that has the adrenaline where she
She's
can
got
pick
that
up a
crazy
car.
adrenaline
Yeah.
streak.
Crazy
Yeah.
trailers, right? But then that leads to like, that dude that took the lady up to Crystal Lake, like what was his part in it? You know? I'm like, so y'all ain't gonna explain that part?
Yeah.
So there were some plot holes. I was kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
that was my only, thing about it. But I do love the graphic, the special effects, because practical effects, good effects.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. This movie originally was budgeted between 500,000 to 1 million. It's estimated. There's some fudging of numbers. So
As always.
as always, yeah. So estimated, it's between 500,000 to $1 million, which is extremely low budget for a horror film that has this many kills in it, and that they actually had blood in like every one of them. This movie grossed close to 40 million. Yeah, close to 40 million.
Yeah, I've seen different
Like,
numbers, but it's a great return on the investment.
yeah.
That's the sort of
Oh,
thing that
yeah.
makes Hollywood producers.
I mean, the numbers that I have are according to IMDb. So,
Yeah.
but anyways,
Right.
it obviously all the parts worked well enough that the audience actually enjoyed it. The plot holes, yeah, there was a few in there, and what movie doesn't have a few plot holes? I
True.
mean, at the end of the day, almost every movie does.
Yeah.
But did those plot holes really take away from the overarching thing of the film? I don't think so. I think overall it still flows, it still tells, and it still works. Acting, considering a lot of these were really young actors and this was their first gig, I think Kevin Bacon was out of the counselors. I think he was the most seasoned one, and this was only his like fourth gig. So
Oh yeah.
so like even him being like the most seasoned is not that experienced. And I think overall they did a good job. Like there was very few times where I was like, okay, can you put a little more like oomph into that or whatever? But overall, again, like the acting was pretty decent for what it is. And then again, the special effects, chef's kiss. That I would give like a 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 for the special effects.
This kind of I think this is before the era of the hoochie daddy shorts because those
Oh
men were
yeah.
not wearing the hoochie daddy shorts.
No, those were post Hoochie Daddy shorts. We've already done an episode on sleepaway camp, and almost every guy in there was wearing booty shorts.
Worst.
And so we were like, we have to talk about the booty shorts. All right. The ending, with it being the mom. How do we all feel about that?
It was great.
I think it's one of the best.
Great. Karen, why don't you start us off?
Okay, so yeah, you know when all these people are getting killed, except for the first lady, she didn't know the person because she had a look of shock. She wasn't calm or anything.
Well, the
Oh, how you
first kill
doing?
was the 58 campers.
No, I'm not talking about that. Okay, but the second kill, how about that? The new cook coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but every other one, you're like, oh, okay, that's somebody that is, unassuming. The old man, what's his name, Randy?
Yeah, I think so.
He was kind of unassuming, even though he was a bit crazy. He was a bit more believable because of the fact that, most men have the body strength to do what they need to do to a person, like sticking the
Ralph.
arrow through a mattress. Huh, Ralph?
Crazy Ralph.
Like sticking an arrow through a mattress into a human body takes a lot of strength.
It does.
Yeah.
Lifting a body and to hang onto a door takes a lot of strength. But then you see this mother acting could have been better, a little bit better when she was like, "Oh, curse this place," and then she goes on to the story, and I was like, oh, "Okay, wait a minute, you know something we don't know." But I actually like the twist. I actually like the mother. I would love to saw more of her, like maybe her throat probably gotten cut, and then she like ran into the water and just kind of bloop 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 bloop, and then
Mhm.
came back some more. Um, and maybe you actually did find out that her son didn't die, and then you have your other second, human element that's maybe her accomplice that's been helping her lift up these bodies and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So yeah, that twist was my first as a kid twist. I should have been watching it as a kid anyways, but my mom was like, we're gonna watch it together. So yeah, I love the mother as the villain when she switches that personality using the kid's voice. Get her, mommy, get her. I will,
Mhm.
Jason. It's okay.
Okay, Bill.
I thought it was a great twist. She did a good job. Um, I don't think I would change anything about it. I mean, looking back on it now, if you wanted to make a continuing series, this is probably not the way to do it because you kill your killer in the first film. And I never really bought that Jason was alive and she didn't know about it. And I just, what it's, it's plausible deniability. But I thought it was a really good twist, even though I knew as soon as I saw her, this woman was bad news.
Mhm.
Bad news. She can, but she's good. She has a smile that is, yikes. That's
Mhm.
a bad smile there. You're in trouble. And I thought she did the role very well.
Yeah.
And they saved. It wasn't the best effect, but it was in slow motion.
Mhm.
How do you up all these? Again, I still think the throat slit was the best effect, and that
Oh
was like the
yeah.
first real one we see. So how do you? And they did edit the hatchet to the face. Um, we didn't get to see as much as Tom Savini had initially shown. I don't know if that was something they had to do to get rid of an X rating, or if it just the effect didn't quite work.
I think
I
it
find
was
that
the
hard to
X
believe.
rating. I think I remember
Yeah, I
reading
think it
somewhere
was the X rating.
there was a few scenes that they had to cut because
Mhm.
it would have pushed them out.
Yeah. And as it was, the ratings board got a lot of crap for releasing this movie with an R. And you can see their reaction
Mhm.
was to just completely castrate part two.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
you got to be Steven Spielberg if you're going to be showing stuff like that.
Clay, what about you? What did you think about the ending?
I think the ending's fantastic. I mean, it isn't definitely isn't expected. I like very effective twist. I think the decapitation scene at the end works well. It's nicely shot, slow motion. It works well. While I'm glad that they didn't continue with Mrs. Voorhees as the killer in the later movies, the fact that she certainly had a motive for doing what she does in the first film. Mother loves her son. That's the one of the best motivations for that sort of thing, I suppose. So that worked. Yeah, very effective. Definitely very effective. And as far as twist endings go, yeah, wasn't I didn't really see it coming, but I was younger than Bill was when I first saw it. Even though I didn't see it in the theater, I was still pretty young, about 12 years old or something like that. And I definitely wasn't analyzing stuff too much. I was just sort of in the moment.
Yeah.
That's another thing maybe to observe about Friday the 13th, especially part one. These movies work best from the gut. Sometimes they break down if you analyze them too much.
Yeah.
Um, They are films that appeal to the subconscious, visceral mind in a way that something like Psycho maybe doesn't.
Yeah. So for me, the ending, I think it was perfect for this film. I would have actually kind of liked maybe seeing the mom maybe in that diner scene at the beginning. I think that would have been kind of cool. Like if she was sitting there next to the guy who ended up like driving the girl, I think that would have been kind of cool. Especially since we wouldn't have known who that was. Like if she was just sitting there eating, like I think that would have been kind of neat. I do think it was a great ending. I think it was kind of cool that we didn't know really even her existence until that moment. And then when you go back and you watch it a second time and you know that it's her who's doing all of this, it changes the movie for you. Your first watch, especially if you don't know the ending, is a completely different film than the second time you watch.
Right.
And I think that that's what makes it again, that's kind of what makes it a little bit on the iconic side. And then on top of that, I loved Jason coming out of the water and grabbing the girl. I thought that was brilliant. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Like you really got the audience on that one because we're like, oh, okay, the movie's ending, it's done, and then all of a sudden we get one last, you know,
Huzzah!
yeah, response where we're like visceral response that we can have to it all. With our final thoughts, give a small portion on how you think this movie impacts horror, but we're going to give our final thoughts and we're going to give a skull rating. So instead of stars, instead of well, whatever, thumbs up, whatever, we do skulls here. 1 out of 5. One, because people did put effort in. Even if the movie sucks, they put effort in. So we need to give them some love. And then 5 being this is a perfect film. So, Clay, would you like to start us off with your final thoughts on the film?
It's certainly iconic. I don't think the slasher genre as we understand it today would exist without Friday the 13th. Uh, yeah, I might prefer other films in the series, but I'm not going to let that take away from my assessment of the greatness of and the impact of the first movie. And with that, I would say I got to give it a 4 skull rating. I'm not going to give it a 5 skull rating because it's not perfect.
That's fair.
But I definitely would give it a 4. So much of modern horror cinema just wouldn't exist without Friday the 13th. So that's why.
That's fair. That's fair. Bill, how about you?
Feel like I would give it a 3, but I'm going to give it a 3.5 because I think it deserves another half just for the fact that it succeeded as well as it did and inspired so many others. And along with Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, really created the horror franchise. You know, the films that would just keep on coming. Maybe they shouldn't have kept on coming, but they did, and people kept going to see them. And there comes a point in the 80s, in the latter half of the 80s, where almost every horror film that came out that year was a sequel.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, in terms of its influence, it's hard to it's an important film.
It is. It is. Karen?
Oh, yeah, I love this film for what it is and for what it became. I really did not, for the future versions, I did not care for the supernatural element. Um, I love the lore behind it, even if I redid the ending and she did have an accomplice and it was her son, even though she said her baby died, her son died, it was her baby that died and reborn into this new thing. And I would have used him as like, the catalyst for everything else. This is my son. Now he's like, helping me out kill all the people who are responsible, quote unquote. I would have given it 4 stars because of the fact that you could always rewatch it and still find little tidbits here and there that you might have missed. I certainly know I could have done a better job at doing a remake. Instead of that 2009 version. I think it was 2009.
Yeah. 2008, 2009, something like that.
I could have done a whole better remake of it, but
I would give this I would give this a 4.5. It's two full skulls because of Savini. Two full skulls. And the other 2.5 is because it is iconic. It is, there are 12 movies in this franchise,
Surprisingly.
which is one of the most in horror. So the fact that people keep coming back means something. And personally, it's a movie I watch it every year. Anytime it's a Friday the 13th, the original gets played or one of the many sequels gets played. And it's enjoyable. It's fun. It's great to like watch something and just go, oh, that was cool. Savini, he knows what he's doing. Or like the Kevin Bacon scene where I'm like, aw, bacon on a stick. Just different things like that. It's a reminiscent film. It's a film that you can just go back to over and over and over again. So I would actually give it 4.5. Like I said, there's obviously things that could be done better, but I would give it a 4.5.
All right. Since Lisa wasn't able to help or hang out with us on the episode, we did snag her really quick. She can give her a little bit of a final take and her skull rating for Friday the 13th. Lisa, all yours.
Okay. Unfortunately, I didn't get to be there, but it's okay. My final take is it's really actually kind of funny since I watched it again now that I'm kind of a grown up. The fact that the woman was mentally ill, the mother, you don't really realize that until you watch it again when you're older. It was actually pretty intriguing. I didn't feel sorry for most of the teenagers. I would have to give it a 3.5. I liked it, but it wasn't as scary to me now the second round. I treated it more like a crime drama, to be honest with you. So, but it's always good to watch it, and I do like the ending where Jason pops out of the on the boat and scares her to death. That was kind of like the Carrie ending, so it was kind of a shocker. But yeah, I would have to give it a 3.5 on the skull rating because, you know, I guess maybe it just, I don't know, it just didn't seem as scary to me as it did when I was younger.
That's fair.
But yeah.
What were some of the things that you absolutely loved about it?
Okay, I absolutely love the fact that they could not figure out if Jason was real or not. That was pretty cool because it had me going for a minute. And I liked the final girl. She did a really good, awesome job.
She did.
She really did. She was a good scream queen. I'll tell you. Can't remember the actress's name, but she did a great job. Of course, definitely didn't mind when some of the smart-ass teenagers died because they were being disrespectful. And the girl who played the mother, oh my God, she did a phenomenal job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for a while, I really did think Jason was actually alive the way she was talking. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, what are some things that you think they could have done better?
Oh, I think it could have gone a little bit faster. I think the pace was a little slow at the beginning. The acting was, except for those few people that I was talking about, the rest of the acting was kind of so. Cinematography was a little, but then again, the special effects was pretty good though. I mean, for the budget they had, we did get what we wanted. So
yeah,
definitely like that. The decapitation scene.
Is this one of your favorite Friday the 13th movies?
No, this is not. I would have to say one of my favorites is has to be Jason Friday the 13th 3. When I saw it in the movie theater, it was in 3D. So that was one of my favorites. And then, of course, the one where he's in space, Jason X, because it's got my buddy Kane Hodder. And it's just really obscure. It makes no sense. So it's kind of a fun movie. It's like, how's he breathing? How do you get up? And then, of course, my third favorite of the Jason series is definitely Jason versus Freddy. I don't know. There's just something about that movie that's just. But
it's comically good.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the way Freddy can kind of get to Jason a little bit. That was the tweaking part. But yeah, I'd say that in my favorite. So the series, the 3D, because I saw it in 3D, because that'll always have a special place in my heart. And it was 3D back when 3D was actually 3D and not this whatever we have now that I can't watch because it makes me seasick. And then Jason X, of course, and then, of course, Freddy versus Jason. Those are my favorites.
Rock on, rock on. Well, thank you for taking time to be able to come in real quick so we can get your hot take on Friday the 13th.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you so very much. Now we're going to get right back to the show.
But now we have entered my favorite part of the episode, the electric chair. Okay, so the electric chair is for our guests. They get asked 3 questions. If they survive the electric chair, they get a sticker. So we are excited. The first question, let's just go ahead and dive in. Let's kind of try to do this a little bit on the rapid fire side. Who is your favorite horror villain? And it doesn't have to be Friday the 13th related. All right. Bill, you go first.
Dr. Phibes.
All right. Rock on.
Easy.
Rock on. Clay?
Jason.
Rock on. I mean, there's a reason why we had you on.
Yeah.
All right. We are now going to do Kiss, Marry, Kill. Friday the 13th edition. And here are your choices. Mama Voorhees, Jason, and Alice.
Well, I'll marry Alice. And can you kill Jason? I don't think so. So I'll have to kill Mama, and I'll kiss Jason. I hope he takes it with good humor.
Okay.
He'll kill you because you killed his mama.
Yeah, I feel like I'm doomed here.
Yeah.
Alice is going to be a widow real fast.
Unfortunately.
Clay, how about you?
Bill stole exactly my order. That's exactly the order things I would do. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm just going to say thank you on that.
Y'all just going to leave poor Alice as a widow. Dang.
Yeah, well.
Because, see, I actually would marry Jason. Because then he wouldn't kill me. Because I'd be his wife.
And maybe he'd be happy then, but maybe he wouldn't kill anybody else.
Yeah, he's cool like that.
He might solve the whole thing.
He just wants somebody to love him. That's all he wants.
Yep.
Yeah, he does.
He just wants to be loved.
He's out there washing the car.
But then he'll be a mama boy, though.
He's out washing the car thinking, I used to be a killer. What happened to me?
In this economy, if he can at least bring in an income, so it's a dual income household, I'm down.
Yeah. You're mowing grass with
He has a good work ethic.
He does. And he can do all the heavy lifting. So we're golden. All right. And then this is the final question. What is your horror hot take? So what is your opinion that usually is not a common one and people usually go, I don't think so, dude.
If you had a choice between watching all the Friday the 13th movies, all the Halloween movies, and all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, You may discover, much to your chagrin, that watching all of the Friday the 13th movies is a much more enjoyable experience than watching the other franchises. Because while Nightmare on Elm Street is a great movie, some of the films that followed had just wildly ups and downs, real crashing lows, and a few highs that got close or maybe just a little bit better. Dream Warriors is my favorite. Halloween starts up here and immediately nosedives into the ground and then amazingly digs a hole in the ground and keeps on going. Absolutely wretched. Friday the 13th starts here, pretty much stays here all the way through. Even the ones that people say are terrible, like Jason in Space, I find purely entertaining. Great movies, not even close, but it didn't start out as a great movie, it keeps at that level. It does what it does pretty well. So yeah, and I know this because for another podcast we watched all the Halloween movies, all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, and all the Friday the 13th movies, and I was shocked at how that was the only series that didn't make me want to pull out my fingernails occasionally.
All right, Clay, what is your hot take?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Jason X, the Jason in Space movie, is much better than people give it credit for. It may not be particularly scary, but I think at that point in the franchise, they were going for more what the heck factor than trying to be scary. There's some good kills in that movie, but just the guts that it took to come up with the idea of having Jason cryogenically frozen, taken on board a space station and let loose. Yeah, that's a great idea for a movie. It was a lot of fun. So yeah,
kind of reminds me of like Leprechaun in Space.
A little bit, yeah.
Kind of reminds me of Deadpool in space. He's, at this point, Jason is now an indestructible mutant.
I'm okay with that.
One of the novelizations talks about his mutant regenerative ability, and that's actually, at the beginning of Jason Goes to Hell, that's what they're trying to get a hold of him for, is so the government agency is trying to dissect him so they could discover his mutant regeneration power. It's like Wolverine with a machete.
Yeah. So,
but would he be a good mutant or a bad mutant? Like, would he just go after everybody? I don't care if you're a good guy or a bad guy. I don't care. It's gonna kill everybody.
Yep.
Hopefully Magneto doesn't get his hands on him.
Oh yeah, that wouldn't be good.
Yeah. Well, audience, listeners, our little lovely ghouls, what do you love about that ending? And do you think you would have been able to make it out alive? Let us know. You can actually continue that conversation on our social media. We have Instagram, TikTok, X, Threads. Our Facebook group is super fun and awesome, so please make sure you go and join there. You can also, Karen does post a lot. I'm like constantly like sharing crap from everywhere. But you can also subscribe, rate us wherever you listen to podcasts, including on YouTube. So can't wait for y'all to come and join us there. But gentlemen, where can they find you? Bill, where can they find you at?
I have a webpage, billmulligan.com, even though I've only got one book. And but Facebook, Decades of Horror podcast, Deep Images podcast, Video Store Junkies podcast. It's crazy.
And all those links will be in the bio. So you guys are in the description for this episode. So you guys can click and find our Mr. Bill. And Clay, where can they find you?
Online, you can find me on Facebook. I have two different Facebook profiles, but the one that I check is facebook.com/Claygill2015, Claygill2015. You can also look at my author page on Amazon. Just get on Amazon and search Clay Gilbert. I have 14 books out, and as I said earlier, I've got a 15th and a 16th coming out before the end of the year. So trying to keep busy. Try and keep it.
And again, those links will be in the description for you guys to be able to find these guys. Karen, where can they find you?
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Twitter, now known as X, Reddit. And also, I would absolutely survive because these hands are rated E for everybody.
All right. I am Shannon. You can find me at SpillTY Media Mind on all the platforms. You can just Google it and find me there. But before we go, we want to thank you, the listeners. We couldn't do this without you guys. We really do appreciate everything that you've done for us. Every listen, every like, every comment does amazing things for us. So we really do appreciate y'all, and we hope you have a wonderful day. Stay spooky, our lovely little ghouls.
And this has been the Spooky and Kooky Podcast of Earth Station Boo.